worst UFC pay-per-view of the year has come and gone. Canada, man, we have the maple syrup. You guys can't really see it, but I swear that is real Canadian maple syrup that I got as a gift. I have an even bigger one than that, like back there somewhere, but it would have blocked the gloves. Speaking of the gloves, one of the signatures on there, Ariel Helwani, one of our favorite Canadians, I would say. GSP is another one of my favorite Canadians, but he was not on this card. Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis were on this card. So I say we hop right into the main event and talk about that. So I think like this card maybe wasn't the best, obviously, that we've ever seen, but I think the main event really like made up for the lack of maybe more fun fights in the main card. But Dricus du Plessis, man, for those who didn't see it, defeats Sean Strickland by split decision, 248-47s, and then the other judge scored at 48-47 for Strickland. And Dricus du Plessis is the middleweight champion, dude. So I think the obvious starting point for this conversation, which will kind of like cover the technical side of the fight in that, who did you think won this fight?
Yeah, good question, right? Because like I think the whole fact that it's a split decision for a title is like really dampening. It's like especially now it's like well we have to see like not necessarily me saying it, but the MMA community, it's more like we have to see the Strickland rematch, like even before Adesanya. So that's the unfortunate part about it. But as far as who won, like I mean, I think I would have give it to Dricus anyways, to be honest with you. Like I thought the middle rounds were where he really started to just put it together, and he was just, I thought, like obviously Strickland and that jab of his, the best in the division. Like he's just trying to keep Dricus at bay pretty much with it, and it was pretty effective early on, and you could see like DDP obviously gassing out too. But then seemingly like once obviously the headbutt happened and then the huge cut on Strickland's eye, it just seemed like from there it's like that's kind of like all DDP needed to see, and from there it seemed like he was comfortable and tired.
All the judges needed to see too, according to Dominic Cruz. We were talking about that. Yeah. Poor
Oh my
Dom.
God. Yeah, dude, he was getting dry for that. But
Yeah.
we let John Anik take care of that because he had to put him in his place. Like that. It was so funny. He was on one. But I mean, as far as this, because like you see it, like I saw a post too saying like something alluding to Dricus's face and obviously how his eye was all swollen. He's like someone like making fun, like he didn't do more, basically the whole robbery situation, because especially with a title fight, it's gonna end in a split decision. Like you're gonna have a lot of robbery claims being called. But like I mean, like they both absolutely took it to each other. I mean, in the terms of the power punching from DDP, like I thought honestly it was pretty clear like he was the more dominant fighter in that aspect, and that's ultimately what brought it home for him. Because like man, like you had to think like man, like he's gonna gas out sooner rather than later. But him and Strickland, like they both, like especially that last round, it's unfortunate like that too, because I think that was a pretty clear 10-9 for Strickland, and then obviously that being the last round going to the decision, it's like, well, this could really go either one or two ways. And I didn't see the split decision coming. I didn't want the split decision to happen, but it did. I get it, but
I mean, it just speaks to how close the fight is. And you know what's even crazier? Like, I disagree with you. I think Strickland won the fight, but at the same time, I also agree with almost everything you said, because it's true. Like that just speaks to how close this fight was, man. Because all of the numbers in terms of volume, they lean towards Strickland, and I think he did do damage, obviously because of Dricus's eye. But then, like you said, at the same time though, Dricus did a lot of damage to Sean, and yeah, it might have been on a headbutt, but like you said, those power shots were really there, and those may not have been the ones that cut him. But to act like they don't mean anything is kind of crazy. And I think DDP also did a good job at kind of mixing it up too. Even though he didn't do much after the takedowns, getting them kind of helps you because, that's a dominant move to take someone down.
That's why I hardly really said anything about the takedowns because, I mean, they were there obviously, and the judges clearly factored that in, but nothing much was done with them. Sean was able to scoot up against the fence and get back up, and
Which is pretty awesome because
yeah.
DDP is a good wrestler. He's good all around, honestly. But I think it's super interesting too because you were talking about kind of like what you were thinking going into like round 5 because you thought Strickland won round 5. So if you think Du Plessis won, I would imagine you had it 3-1 going into the 5th. And again, like, this speaks to how close the fight was. I had it 2-2 personally, and I had Sean winning the 5th round too, which is why I give it to him. But like I said, at the same time, I can't be mad at like what you're saying because you're not wrong. And that's the thing with like MMA fans nowadays. It just seems like, especially with social media now too, if you don't agree with the outcome of the fight, even if it was a super close fight, it's still somehow a robbery. But this fight is not a fight that you can call robbery either way because even when I was watching it, like sitting there, saw the fight went to DDP, and even then, like I thought Strickland had won it, but I was like, I'm not really mad at this. Like, yeah, I kind of agree with you. It sucks because it creates question marks that don't really need to be there because Du Plessis, I mean, this is one of the best performances that he's really had. Might not have been as dominant, but one of the question marks around DDP was his gas tank, and in this fight it didn't really seem like that was a problem, and I was just super impressed by him. I was super impressed by Strickland, and it just speaks to how fun the middleweight division is, man. And there's still Israel Adesanya waiting in the wings, like you mentioned, and Hamzat's still out there, Cannonier is still out there, and you kind of touched on this, so I did want to get into it a little bit. What do you personally think should be next for the champion DDP?
Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot of, still trying to just like let this fight sink in and go back and try to take things from it. But it's cool because he was asked about UFC 300 afterwards, and it doesn't take a genius to see that he's clearly pretty banged up from this fight with Strickland. So, but I liked his answer in the sense that, like, like it's still a once in a lifetime opportunity to, have a fight on that card, much, even more so a title fight. So, like I think that would obviously be very cool. But now it brings the question whether, Adesanya has another fight before his next title fight, which I think would be plausible. Like, obviously, like
I mean, do you think he should? Because I personally think he should, honestly, with
think
no disrespect to him.
Yeah, dude, the Hamzat fight. I mean, I think that's right there. I think like both guys are clearly, very focused on that middleweight title. Like, and I think both guys clearly like need to, that at least like that one fight to show like, they're still in top tier form, and can get that belt.
I mean, me personally though too, with Adesanya, and granted he's been one of the greatest middleweight champions that we've ever seen, and that's the reason why he's even in the title conversation despite coming off a loss, but he's already gotten an immediate rematch before after losing the title, and at a certain point, how many like immediate rematches are you going to give him? Like, you didn't even really see this treatment back in the day with like some of the bigger name fighters. I just don't think that it really makes sense. But it does make sense at the same time though, because him and DDP have that history that they have. So it's not like if they make it, I'd be opposed to it because, like I said, Israel Adesanya has such a great legacy at middleweight that you can't really be mad at it. But at the same time, you kind of want to see the division move forward a little bit. So I'm not really sure. Like, I still think it should be Adesanya. I think a Strickland rematch would make sense too. Hamza, I definitely think needs to get a win, I should say. I mean, the win over Usman is at middleweight, but that's not really like over a middleweight contender. So I just didn't really think that warrants a title shot. And Cannonier is more like a dark horse. So that's why, like, if they do give it to Israel Adesanya, like, all right, there's not really like another clear fight. But I don't know, man. They're in a weird spot with middleweight. But the good thing about being in this weird spot is it's not because there's no contenders. It's because there's like a few, and you're not really sure which one should be number one, which I think is a fun thing for the division. I don't know if you agree with that. But,
Yeah.
But anyway, man, this was a super fun fight. I'm glad in a way that it went to a split decision because it just spoke to how close this fight was, and you really could have scored it in so many different ways, and you can't really be mad because I do think like 3 out of those 5 rounds were almost neck and neck, like you're almost too close to call.
Yeah.
So it was a super fun fight, and I'm glad
It's
that these guys got
always
to have it.
it's always interesting for me. Obviously, this now being in Sean Strickland's case, like a guy, you know, how much a guy adapts from the fight that he wins the title into his first title defense, and like in this sense with Strickland, it's like, you got obviously him facing this guy Adesanya has had plenty of championship fights in his time, and Strickland just laying absolutely everything out on the line, not holding back any punches whatsoever, and just pretty much walking down Israel Adesanya to now this fight where we're trying to keep DDP like at bay. We're not trying to let him hit those power punches and whatnot. Even though it did obviously come into fruition for DDP, but man, like yeah, I mean, especially when you got a jab like Strickland, like when you're able to work it, and it's as effective as he has it.
And his defense looked really good too. I just think it's the offense that really was kind of lacking a little bit. And yeah, he
Yeah,
outlanded him, but a lot of those were just like you said. His jab is great, but at the same time, when DDP is landing those like big stinging shots, the
yeah,
jab doesn't really look as great to the judges. And you could agree or disagree with that. And like I said, it's just the nature of this fight. There's so many different things you could pick apart to give the edge to whoever you think won. But at the end of the day, like I said, it was just super fun fight. Great way to end the card and a great fight for both fighters to have. And I think they both showed up and they promised war and they gave us war. So how can you not be grateful for that? But moving on to the co-main event, it's a bit of a different conversation, I would have to say. But before we get into that, in case you didn't see it, Raquel Pennington defeats Mayra Bueno Silva by unanimous decision, 249-46s and a 49-45. And Raquel Pennington is now the UFC bantamweight champion for the women's divisions. And there's, I'm not even sure where to start with this because on the one hand, I'm super happy for Raquel Pennington because she's been in the UFC for a while. She just overcame, she's had losses in her career. She's come back, won the fights she needed to win, and now she's the champion from beating Bueno Silva in this vacant title fight. But at the same time, this fight, man, was just not that good. And not even really like in terms of the action. Like there were good moments. It just felt like it was almost like lower level for a world title fight in the UFC. And honestly, I don't even say that in Pennington's sense, but more so in Bueno Silva's, like in her game plan in the fight. I don't really know what happened in those later rounds there with all the laying down. It just seemed like she was done. Like, I don't know if she was exhausted or it didn't seem like she was mentally out of it. But, and even with that though, with no head movement whatsoever on the feet, Pennington was still struggling to really like take her out and really hurt her. It was just, I don't know, man. It was a really tough fight to watch at times. 5 rounds for that it was just a rough way to proceed the Strickland fight. And the whole time, like I remember when I was watching it and I was by Sean's for that. It just felt like everybody was just waiting for it to end. And like everyone agreed, like it's not even like this is that bad of a fight. It's just crazy that this is a world title fight right now. And it was, so you can't really like speak against that. They both deserved it. You know what I mean? They both deserved the title shots. They're the 2 top contenders in the division along with Juliana Pena maybe. It's just unfortunate that this fight was kind of like lackluster, and that's the conversation rather than celebrating Raquel Pennington for finally, climbing the mountain and getting to the top, because she deserves all the credit for becoming a champion. And she won that fight fair and square. It was pretty dominant, I would say. Bueno Silva had her moments, but at the same time, Pennington, she deserved to win. It was pretty clear. But before we move on, because there's honestly not that much to talk about in terms of the fight, we'll talk about the aftermath in a bit. But what did you think of this one, man?
well, yeah, like essentially felt like there was literally no sort of striking to be had until Mayra Bueno Silva was clearly gassed, and like Raquel Pennington could just jump on her and any sort of mount she wanted and just ground and pound. But and then that's pretty much like the big problem here. I think like there were a few rear naked choke attempts and whatnot but none of them ever came. Nothing ever really blossomed into like a real big memorable moment.
And I do think that's partially though because of Pennington's submission defense. I mean, she, like you said, she was in multiple positions that could be bad for certain fighters, but she managed to fight her way out of it. And Rocky, she's like a dirty, not like dirty in the sense that I mean like she cheats, but like she's a gritty fighter is like what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of like work in the clinch, dirty boxing, and that like ground game, just trying to like outlast the other person. And this fight was really like a typical Raquel Pennington win, just in a world title fight. And like I said, I'm just glad that she climbed the mountain and she got there because she does deserve more shine than I think she gets sometimes. It just sucks that, like I said, the conversation is more about the fight rather than, Raquel Pennington is now world champion. But anytime someone wins the title in a division where it seems like there's not a true number one contender, it's always fun to think about what's next. And when I was looking at the division, I just mentioned Juliana Pena. That's a person that could fight for the title. I think Aldana is somebody you can throw in there at any point, and she might be able to win a title. But the one name that really popped into my mind, and I definitely want to hear your take on this, I think that Valentina Shevchenko would be crazy not to go up to 135 and at least test her chances against Raquel Pennington. Like, I think Valentina is still a great fighter, and if she could get a title in a second division, that would do so much for her legacy. And her versus Pennington would be a good fight of two girls who have been in the UFC for a while too. So I don't know what you think of the three options that I've outlined, but
no, yeah, I'm in total agreement with the with Shevchenko moving up. It's just still I guess like you're still looking for natural bantamweight contenders that whether it is Valentina Shevchenko or Raquel Pennington holding the title. By the time one of them gets a title shot, then, you want names that you can stack up with them. And that's pretty much the question right now. And, yeah, that's that, man. Like,
not much to talk about with this one, really. It's just it's kind of a shame. But congrats to Raquel Pennington.
Yeah, you gotta remember, too, how... right after Amanda Nunes's retirement, like the question loomed, like, is this division even gonna still exist anymore? And obviously Dana White was pretty set on saying like yes it will, but like we want if we're gonna get co-main events like this and even main events, here and there, then you want them to be way more memorable than this one was. So
yeah, it just stinks because 135 does have people in it. It's just there's a lack of maybe marquee value, and also even the people who do have marquee value like Holly Holm or Misha Tate, they're not really in the title picture right now, and it's just no one's really clamoring to see any of the fights in this division right now. That's why I think like Valentina could be a valuable option, because that could bring some excitement whether she wins or loses, because her name on the ticket will always sell fights because everyone loves watching Valentina Shevchenko. I mean, I definitely do. So we'll see what happens at women's bantamweight. But to move on, Neil Magny versus Mike Malott. I mean, it's crazy that we had the comeback of the year pretty much on the second card. That's kind of crazy. So for those who didn't see that fight, Mike Malott was dominating Neil Magny in quite literally all aspects of MMA. It looked like Neil Magny just had almost no chance. And then in the third round, Malott took some risks on the ground, but seemed like he was exhausted. And Neil Magny came back, used that veteran presence, and just reversed position and ground and pounded Mike Malott and TKO'd him with like 15 seconds left in the fight. Just one of the craziest comebacks I've seen in a while. So what did you think of Mr. Magny's win in there, man?
Yeah, man. I mean, shit. Relatively rough card for the hometown Canadian fighters.
0-6, I think, for the men. Because Jillian Robertson won the fight, and Jasmine Jasudavicius. Yeah. So the Canadian women, they got it, but
for the guys, it all culminated right here in this fight. Because, Doug, coming into the fight, I think the relatively easy thing that you could probably see coming was Mike Malott. He's gonna work the leg kicks early because Neil Magny seemingly still isn't able to check them, and that's what did end up happening. And it seemed like, okay, well, there you go. Mike Malott's already. He's wasting no time. He's got Neil Magny's Neil.
I know.
Yeah,
Neil Magny.
Neil Magny's lower body already in kind of like a weak spot, and that he can obviously just from there build on. And then yeah, like everything seemed like all right, like it's gonna be a handy unanimous decision, and then no, like this dude Neil Magny, man, like it's pretty awesome with the guy, honestly. The further he gets into his career, and he's fighting these kinds of fights where these guys are just they're taking it to him like straight up early, and he's able to respond. Yeah, man, it was a must win. Obviously, not not really in the way that you would want it to, because obviously it had to come down to a freaking crazy comeback like that. But he got it done one way or the other, and
Maybe it'll reinvigorate him a little bit. Who knows?
yeah.
I mean, he was on a losing streak, and you did say this was a must-win. I mean, there were conversations before this fight that Neil Magny could even get cut or be on the verge of getting cut if he loses this fight, because it's kind of unfair in a way, because Neil Magny has fought some killers, and not all the people that he's lost to have been like slouches. But winning this fight, I think, was big for him, and it more so stinks for Mike Malott because he should have won this fight. There was no reason why he should have lost, and this one is pretty much solely on him. Like, there's not Neil Magny, yeah, like he did what he had to do, but at the same time, if Mike Malott had the cardio and the fight IQ to last all 3 rounds, he would have won that fight. He was up on all the scorecards. That third round could have ended up being a 10-8. Who knows? But I'm not sure. I think Malott still would have ended up winning that fight. It's just he just kind of fumbled it at the end there. So it's definitely tough for him, especially in front of the home crowd. It is, yeah. It's just you wonder what's going to be next for both guys, because they're both, I think, in interesting spots now. So before that, it was Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Not really too much to say for this fight. I don't think. Chris Curtis looked pretty good. Kind of back and forth at times. Both dudes, honestly, they're just tough as nails. I think that's why you didn't really see many like crazy stinging shots. I think both of these guys knock out so many people, but between the two of them, I think they've both been knocked out like twice, one each. So clearly both have great chins, and that showed in this fight. Pretty fun. I mean, back and forth, like I said. Chris Curtis got the win by split decision. I kind of thought it should be unanimous decision, but at the end of the day, he still got the W, and it's a good win for Chris Curtis, and I like him, so I'm happy for him. But let's move on to the main card opener, because there is some conversation to be had here. And Movsar Evloev, I think I said that right, stays undefeated. He is 18-0 after defeating Arnold Allen by unanimous decision. This fight was interesting for a lot of reasons. I thought it was another one that was super close on this card. This card had a lot of, honestly, close fights. But Evloev did good at, kind of chaining his wrestling together, because Arnold Allen's takedown defense looked incredible in this fight, but it was like those second and third shots with that chain wrestling. Like that's when he really started to have some success. But either way, Allen still had good footwork, good get-ups. It was just, I don't know. I think it was just super close. And then you had the whole illegal knee situation. But before we get into that, what did you think of this fight?
So I think really this fight, I feel like it's one of those fights that doesn't get the sort of credit that it probably deserves, in the sense that, it was long and boring and whatnot. But I mean, I thought in terms of sequencing, like I didn't think it was, I didn't think there was really any dull moment. I felt like both guys were clearly, trying to engage and get a finish, but both guys are obviously so stingy, and they're able to just maneuver and find ways to just exploit and attack. Evloev's case, like, seemed like he was pretty much just taking whatever Arnold Allen was giving to him, and I thought that's ultimately like what willed him to the win. And then the knee controversy, obviously being the big talk the big talk of this whole fight. Um, yeah, that's just it's just really unfortunate, man. Like obviously, got to factor in the fact that it's the Ontario Commission, so
Yeah.
that's playing its whole factor, and then just the
By,
fact
by the, I
that
want to say this too, just in case, because there are people who don't know this. 'Cause I've been seeing like comments about it. I guess they just weren't paying attention to the broadcast because they did say this. But in Ontario, it's different than the normal like unified rules. They can. It's like any time your hand is on the ground, it can be one hand, it can be one finger. Doesn't have to be weight bearing as long as any part of your hand is touching the ground. You're a downed opponent, and it doesn't matter if you're doing it to stall, like Evloev kind of was. It's still illegal to knee him, but I think because Evloev was doing it a little bit to stall, I think that's why the point wasn't taken away, even though he did illegally knee Evloev 4 times. That's why it's tough, because you need to have like a rule against it, or you need to have a rule that makes it clearer, because you could tell Allen knew that he wasn't supposed to knee him because he was trying to lift him up and throw the knee. He just wasn't timing them well, which is why he ended up hitting him with a couple of illegal ones. It's just you kind of have to blame both guys in a way, because Arnold Allen should know better and really be more careful, and Evloev at the same time, you can't do that in a fight like that. In my opinion, that's just towing the line. And when you get illegally kneed like that, you kind of can't really say much. And to his credit, he didn't. He came in, I think it was after like a minute and a half after getting 4 illegal knees to the head. That says a lot about his toughness, by the way. And I mean, Arnold Allen's tough too, though. I mean, he was leading with his head almost the whole fight and getting hit a lot by Evloev, and it just seemed as if Evloev was a tiny bit ahead of him the whole fight. And he got the decision because of it. I saw some people debating it, but I don't know. I do think the right guy won.
Yeah, wins like these, I guess, in these fashions for someone like Evloev, who just continues to climb and climb and make a bigger name for himself. It's just gonna be more detractors pretty much coming and saying like, this guy really is not all that, and then a bunch of names that could beat him easily in their mind. It's like,
well, he's in the top 5 now, so
right,
they're gonna get their wish one way or the other. I mean, this dude's either gonna be it, or he's gonna get beat like some of these detractors say. And I don't know, man. I mean, he has some skills. I think it's like a style thing for him. Certain guys he just matches up really well against. Arnold Allen is just a tough fight for anyone. He's so good all around, and like I said, the takedown defense definitely doesn't help Evloev, especially with that wrestling style. But I think there's definitely guys in the top 5 we could do well against. But at the same time, if someone comes in there with good takedown defense, you really wonder, because that's when it seems to become 50-50 with him. But overall, decent main card, not great. I think the main event really kind of salvaged it. I think if that fight sucked, then people would have been talking a lot about the main card being like not worth it. But overall, it was pretty fun. In terms of the prelims, kind of mentioned her a little bit earlier. I think this fight just has to be talked about. Jasmine Jasudavicius, got that one, wrote it down. Like I was saying to you before the pod, however Bruce Buffer says it, that's how I'm going to say it. So Jasmine Jasudavicius beats Priscilla Cachoeira by submission. But the reason why we're really talking about this fight is not just because she had basically 12 minutes of control time over Cachoeira in a 14-minute fight. Not because she outlanded her by literally 300. Jasmine Jasudavicius outlanded Priscilla Cachoeira 326-26, and really proved herself as a prospect to watch at 125. But 10-7 round in round 2 on Sal D'Amato's scorecard. Can't remember the last time I saw that. So anytime someone manages to get a 10-7 round, has to be talked about. So shout out to Jasmine, man. What did you think of her?
Yeah, in terms of Cachoeira's case, like this kind of looked like someone to me who just looked outmatched straight up from opening bell. Like you could see, like in each round, she came into the round wanting to approach the round in some way, but
coming into fight week massively overweight is another approach too. Hey, I'm not gonna get into it like a lot because it would take a bit and it's not even worth it, because you'd rather celebrate Jasmine's win. But Priscilla Cachoeira has had a history of like kind of pulling things like this, and she's a little bit of a dirty fighter, I would say, and I don't mean it like in a good way. I think she's kind of one of those fighters who will really do anything to win, even if it's kind of like towing the line between legal and illegal. And Jasmine Jasudavicius even talked about this, how she felt like she worked so hard in training camp just for Cachoeira to come in so far overweight they had to change the weight class for the fight to even happen. And I don't know if you noticed this too, before the third round started, like when they were first getting to the center, Priscilla tried to like shake her hand and Jasmine was like, nope. Like, and I respect that because, I mean, this fight was at bantamweight. I think they were both around like 133 pounds. I mean, these are two flyweights. I can understand why Jasmine Jasudavicius would be a little ticked about that, especially when you're working your ass off in training camp just for your opponent to come in so far overweight. But I mean, karma's kind of a bitch in this case because Jasmine really just lit her up in every facet of MMA. I mean, we knew her ground game is fantastic. On the feet, she's pretty quick. I mean, she's not the most technical striker at times, but she's good. It's not like she's bad. I think she really is somebody that we could be seeing at the top at some point at women's 125. I mean, she's really fun to watch. Every time I've seen her fight, she's been fun. But
it's crazy. Towards the end of round 2, and I think really from that, and then obviously the last round where Jasmine was able to get the finish. Like there were 3 different sets of Darce chokes that Jasmine had her in. The one not being that super deep. So it's like, okay, this is obviously going to be another surely handed round for Jasmine, yada, yada.
Also, to remember, the only reason why they're on the ground is because she dropped her with an overhand early in the round. Like, this round could not have been more dominant for Jasmine.
And then she got her into another one that was deep. And then at that point, it's like, like, Cachoeira, like, come on, like, give it up. Like, actually, just, like, give it up. Like, tap. And then there's still a way to get out of it. She still wasn't going to go out that way. Only to go out that way anyways, the third time around. Obviously, the third time being the charm.
She looked exhausted, too, at that point. And how could you not be? Like, when you're getting destroyed like that.
That was, man. That was the look of somebody that was just all business, pretty much. Like, just nothing was going to stop her from complete domination. In the fucking sense of a 10-7, like, Jesus Christ.
We only talk about 10-7s when Ariel Helwani's giving them, man. It's crazy to see one in an actual fight for the first time in a while. But, honestly, moving on, though, one last story from this card. And speaking of 10-7 rounds, Frankie Edgar got inducted to the UFC Hall of Fame. Someone who could not be more deserving of it, has so many great moments in the UFC. I mentioned 10-7s. His trilogy with Gray Maynard is one of my favorite trilogies in MMA history. I mean, the second fight especially, Edgar had to get... I mean, we're talking about a dominant round. Gray Maynard's first round over Frankie Edgar in their second fight might be one of the most dominant rounds in MMA history. And Frankie somehow did not lose or get finished in that fight, which is nuts. I mean, he dropped Frankie, I think, I want to say like 4 or 5 times. And it looked like he had him out of there multiple times in that fight. But Frankie managed to win the rest of the rounds, even after that, which is crazy. And that fight was a draw. And then their third fight, it was pretty much the same. In the first round, Gray Maynard dropped him, I think, once or twice. And then Frankie Edgar, again, just takes over. And then eventually finishes Gray Maynard. But besides that, I mean, I listed it because it's just worth noting. Beat BJ Penn 3 times. Obviously, he beat him for the title, and BJ was still pretty much like maybe a little bit past his prime, but he wasn't done, that's for sure. I mean, he lost to Frankie Edgar twice, and then the third time way later on. Beat Charles Oliveira, Sean Shirk, Uriah Faber, Chad Mendez, Cub Swanson twice. The Yair Rodriguez fight, I always think of that because they were really trying to push Yair Rodriguez at that time when that fight happened, and Frankie Edgar said, hold my beer. He fucked Yair Rodriguez up, dude. It was crazy. I mean, this dude is a UFC legend, and that word is thrown around a lot, but he really is a legend. I mean, former lightweight champion, multiple-time challenger for the UFC featherweight title. Had a couple fun fights with Jose Aldo. Honestly, he didn't win them, but they were still good. And even has a win at 135 over Pedro Munoz, man. I love it. And, we're Jersey proud, so we might have a little bit of a bias, but Frankie Edgar's the man.
TR. New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
dude. Shout out to Frankie. Yeah, man. It's unfortunate because obviously, someone that was still active really not that long ago. So like for newer fans and stuff, tuning in like I think there's definitely no doubt they've heard of the name Frankie Edgar, but just to see like the way he had to go out, obviously on a pretty bad skid, like yeah, that was unfortunate, but man, that does nothing to stain the legacy of
oh
this
no,
guy's career whatsoever,
not at
and
all.
that's pretty awesome that he was able to go out, obviously on his own terms or whatnot, and then even just get surprised. Like he was just at the car and they surprised him with this, so it's
I
pretty
love Frankie
cool.
Edgar, man. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. He really is. Like, he's really just, and he kind of like leans into this brand because it is just so him. But he really is the UFC everyman, and he showed so much grit and determination and heart throughout his whole career from beginning to end. One of the best fighters in the lightweight division for a while. One of the best fighters in the featherweight division for a while. He's awesome, man. Like I said, he's so deserving of this, and it was cool to see him get honored like that because he deserves it, man. He really does. But there's no UFC next week, so we'll see what happens. And you're not going to be here the week after, even though there is a fight night. Might cover that. Might try and stick another video in there. I'm still trying to figure that one out, but we'll figure it out soon enough. But hey, either way, this was a good way to hop back into these big THH episodes, man. I love the pay-per-view recaps. Good first one of 2024, and we'll see you all next time.